Hi, I'm Kristen Woodford, the Routine Queen, podcast host, keynote speaker, and motivator extraordinaire. I help uplevel women's lives, one healthy habit and mindful day at a time. I wasn't always a fan of routines and early mornings, and spent most of my life feeling that although life was great, there seemed to be something that was missing. I was missing a piece of my spark. And over the years, I have built a foundation of healthy daily habits and rituals that created my own secret sauce for feeling the best I've ever felt. I realized that the secret had been right there inside of me the whole time. If you feel like your spark is more of a pilot light, then this podcast is for you. Throughout the podcast, we will cover all areas of life, including the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. It's time to move from feeling like you're just trying to keep up with to-do lists and into feeling like you control your day and ultimately your life. Increase your energy, be present in the moment, and find joy in all moments of life throughout the day. Thank you for joining on this journey. Now let's see how we can up-level today. This is the Routine Queen podcast, healthy habits, and mindful living.
Hey everyone, this is Rachel, and I'm so excited to invite you to join us for the Glow Method, a 3-week path to thriving in a busy life. If you're anything like me, you probably have multiple projects on the go, lots of different responsibilities, you're wearing different hats, and all of these things, for the most part, light you up, but it can get exhausting trying to manage all of them. With that, we want to tell you how you can actually build your capacity and build your resilience so that you can thrive rather than just getting by. This is a 3-part program facilitated by myself, an acupuncturist and integrative health coach, as well as Dr. Ayla Lester, naturopathic doctor, and Amber Baker, holistic nutritionist. Together, the 3 of us are going to walk you through the simple steps that you can start to implement right away so that you start feeling better in your busy life. If you're ready, come and join us. Go to www.glowintegrative.com and come and see what it's all about. We can't wait to see you there. We start on May the 7th.
Hello, welcome to today. I am Kristen, your routine queen, and today we have the pleasure of talking with Rachel Mark. Rachel, if you, I think it was about a year ago now when you were on the show before. So if you haven't heard that episode, go back. It's a really good one. You don't want to miss it. And for those of you who may not know, Rachel is the co-founder of Glow Integrative, Victoria's leading integrative health clinic focused on supporting women's health across the lifespan. Her clinical practice as a registered acupuncturist and integrative health coach focuses on supporting women who are feeling stressed out, busy, and overwhelmed. I'm sorry, I'm chuckling because it's just basically everyone I know right now. And experiencing a number of health symptoms. She supports people to connect the dots on their health and make lasting change. And welcome to the show, Rachel.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here again.
Yeah, I'm excited to be chatting again. And I'm chuckling, but it's unfortunate that so many of us are in that situation. But if you're listening and if you're feeling busy or overwhelmed or stressed out or all of those things, number one, know that you're not alone. And then what I've started seeing more and more in conversations with my friends is those pesky health symptoms that keep coming up, and they don't know where they're coming from and they don't know how to fix them. And they're getting more and more frustrated. And it's like, is it stress? Is it perimenopause? Is it whatever? And so this discussion is so important and so needed. And so I'm just really excited to be chatting with you today.
I'm so excited too.
So Rachel, for those of you that may not know you or may not have heard the other episode, do you want to give a quick rundown that goes a little bit beyond the introduction, but maybe why you're so passionate about this, and tell us anything that we need to know to kick us off.
Yeah, so I think my journey to the work that I'm doing now is really framed on my own experiences that I've had across my life. And I was a ballet dancer growing up. I had a lot of injuries and I was exposed to acupuncture really early on. And so for me, that kind of opened up the doors of this fascination around the energetic realm, if you will, of, non-traditional Western medicine. But I put that aside and I was continuing on dancing and I was embarking on a professional career as a dancer and was in a very serious car accident. And so for me, it was like, as someone who had always been, really ambitious and goal oriented and not used to failure, to be quite honest, it was like, okay, what comes next? And so I jumped right into a degree in exercise science and kinesiology. I did my undergrad at the University of Calgary. And to me, that felt like, okay, I'm starting to understand the body, understand the mechanics of the body, anatomy, how all these things work. And then I was like, but I feel like there's something missing. And again, with this idea of like constantly seeking and curiosity, I was like, I'll just go do my master's. So then I went and did my master's in health behavior change, which I know is like a lot of crossover to the work that you do, and habit formation and identity and making lasting changes in our health. And I still felt like there was something missing. And so I was like, okay, I've got the body, I've got the mind, like what would round this out? And so I decided to go to acupuncture school. And, in thinking about where I wanted to go as an acupuncturist, for me right away, it was like, oh, I want to do orthopedics. Like I want to help people with injuries, essentially pain management, which is something that acupuncture is really, really well known for. And about 2 weeks into acupuncture school, I'd had a lasting hip injury, but about 2 weeks in, I had hip surgery. I had to be back in school in like a week because the rules were you can't miss classes or you fail. So it was just like, go, 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 go. And I had this life of like, just go, 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 on to the next thing, on to the next thing, on to the next thing. And I think I really took for granted the innate resilience that I had and the innate capacity that I had. And eventually I reached a breaking point. And so I was, a term, I think 1 or 2 terms out from finishing acupuncture school. And I was like, I need a break. I'm exhausted. I'm so burnt out. It's like 7 a.m. and I'm like, I have a headache every day. I'm in pain. Like I wasn't sleeping. I remember being in the student clinic and being like, people actually sleep? Like, you're talking to like these patients in the clinic and they're like, yeah, I sleep really well. And I was like, how's that possible? Like it was just so far from my life, which, is funny, not funny, being trained to become a healthcare provider. And ultimately, so many of us were so unhealthy. And I know I'm not the only one who has that story. But so I decided, okay, I'm going to take 2 months off. And within 2 days, I think it was, I had appendicitis. I ended up in the hospital waiting for an appendectomy. And so, looking back now, I'm like, that was my body. Like for so long, it had been like knocking, like, hey, pay attention. Like we're tired. This isn't working. And I was just like, forge ahead. And I kept doing it and I kept doing it. And I really believe, and, Gabor Mate, who's an incredible physician and thought leader, he has a book called When the Body Says No. And that was my breaking point for like when my body said no. And it's like, it had been politely knocking, trying to get my attention, and I wasn't listening. And eventually it was like banging down the door. And that was, a bit of a wake up for me. But it's really hard to study for board exams and start a career and work full time and do all the things. And I kind of got into that perpetual pattern again. And so when I went into practice and started really along that lines of like orthopedics and musculoskeletal injuries, at some point I was like, this doesn't feel as fulfilling as I want it to. And so I kept seeing people come across my treatment table, and it was like, yes, they're coming in for neck pain, but when we talk about like where's that coming from, it's like, oh, I'm super stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm feeling so busy, I'm not enjoying anything in my life anymore, I'm not sleeping, I'm anxious, like all these symptoms. And that really is what, caused the big deep dive for me into the world of nervous system health and nervous system regulation, and basically understanding how the nervous system is I always describe it as like the web through our entire body. It connects everything within our body. And so it, to me, really needs to be an underlying foundation to how we're supporting health more generally. And that's how I've built my practice now. So it's long-winded, but
I love it. And I was just writing down the name of the book because I knew I would forget it. So, and I have so many questions and so many ways I want this to go. Or like, yeah, there's so much there. And so thank you for sharing. And what I love about you is that you bring in so many different aspects. It's not like you said, like it's everything is so interconnected, and you bring so many different faucets to your practice, which like the holistic view is just amazing. I want to ask this question though before I forget. And there's a lot of people listening who are very stressed. There's a lot of people listening who are stressed who wish they weren't. What do you say to someone when they say, that sounds nice, but I don't have the luxury of not being stressed? It's just, I'm just trying to keep up with life.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very common sentiment, something that I hear a lot. And I think that it's important to recognize that, well, there's a few things. So one is like how much do you want things to be different?
Mm,
And that's a tough question, because the answer probably comes very quickly. I want things to be different. But what are you willing to do to make it different?
hmm
And I see things in the sense of you can that likely when you look at the course of your day, your week, your month, like your life generally, um, there are things that you could adjust, right? Like they may be hard things to do. That could be saying no to someone or something. That could be saying, I need to adjust my work hours. That could be hiring someone to come and help in your house. There are many choices that we can make. And a lot of us have beliefs around what it means if we make that choice. Like someone will judge us. I don't have enough money. That's for somebody else to do. My role is this, right? We have all of these things caught up in our identity around that. And I think as a society, it has become a competition of like who's more stressed, who has more to do. And it comes back to that, like, how much do you want something to be different?
hmm
Because often, actually all the time when I'm working with people, this is not about, and I know this is what you do in your work, this is not like the 360 of your life. We're not saying like scrap it all, burn it to the ground, and let's rebuild. We're saying like, how can you swap out small choices
hmm
across the course of your day that add up to make a really big impact?
And that
And
are actually you're going to sustain.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We have to create a life that is sustainable for us and that we enjoy. Like,
Mhm.
I think that's one of the biggest things. And for me, that was a really big impetus in starting to look more at, sustainable change to support regulation in the nervous system, because we can make really drastic changes. And for me, like, quite frankly, it really drove me crazy when people would say like, you're so stressed, you just need a rest, just take time off. And I would be like, I don't want to. Like, I actually didn't want to. I liked all the things I was doing. It was just that it was organized in a way that was not sustainable for my health and my well-being.
hmm
And so like I did need to make changes, but it didn't mean getting rid of all the things I wanted to do, or like go and sitting on like a deserted island alone and not doing anything. Like, I think we often it's easier to think in black and white. Like
Yeah.
it's easier to think that it's this or it's that, but really there's so much space in between.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm working with people, it's about looking at that space in between, looking at your day specifically, your life specifically, and saying like, what could be a supportive tool at this juncture, like at this point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like it's a badge of honor to be stressed and overwhelmed, and people kind of look at you funny if you're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be fair, I think society has really changed, right? Like, even there are so many things that are a blessing and a curse. You think of like an iPhone or an Apple Watch or something like that. And it's like, yes, that connects us to the world. Yes, that gives us all the information that we need. Like, remember when we used to drive and we had to like Google before, or like get your paper map or print the MapQuest?
Oh, I had the map book. That was the new big
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, and so technology is amazing. Like
Mhm.
it takes away a lot of stressors in some ways, but it also means that you are always available. There's always many things, not even one thing, something. There's always many things coming at you.
Mhm.
And that in and of itself is going to overactivate your nervous system.
Mhm. Can we talk about how stress impacts hormones? Because there is a lot of talk, and maybe it's just me and my friend group, but I don't think it is, about hormone health and things like that. So, can you talk about that connection? And sorry, not to cut you off before you start answering, but I wanted to say too, one of the things that you said in our interview last year that has stuck with me on the regular is that everything is like a dance. And so, like you were just saying, things aren't black and white, but it's like a dance between all of that. And that has stuck with me because even changes that you're trying to implement, it's going to be a dance between, figuring out what works and what doesn't. So, anyways, I just wanted to say that that
Mhm.
stuck with me.
I think on that too, and this is like the disruptive, ruffle the feathers kind of thought, but like we get told, and I think particularly as women and as women who have, you know, taken much more prominent roles in society, like if you look at the last many decades, the evolution, right?
Mhm.
Um, we get told like you can do it all.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that's false.
Yeah.
I think we can do it all, but we can't do it all at the same time. Like you can't be the best mom and at home and present with your kids and be answering your work emails.
Hmm.
You can't be the leader at work and rushing to pick up your kids. Like it's hard, but like we have all these different roles. And so it becomes this dance of like, how can I be present for the things that I'm doing right now? And recognize that then I can be present for something else. And then I can do it all. But I can't do it all right now.
Hmm. Yeah. And we put such unrealistic expectations on ourselves that just can't be met.
No.
Okay. Okay. Stress and hormone health. What do you got?
Stress and hormone health. Okay. So thinking about the nervous system really briefly, and we dove into this a lot in the last episode. So if you haven't listened to that, go and listen to that. But we're talking specifically about something called the autonomic nervous system. And many people are probably familiar with the idea of the fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. This is your stress response. And then your parasympathetic nervous system, rest and digest, right? So these are the two divisions of the autonomic nervous system. When you are stressed, you're living in a state of higher activation in your sympathetic nervous system. And our nervous system as human beings was programmed into our DNA thousands of years ago when the stressors were very different than the stressors we experience now. So if you think, ancestrally, historically, this was like big, massive stressors like lions chasing you in the woods, or fighting for territory, or feast or famine, like big things that most people are not experiencing today.
Actual life and death.
Yeah, actual life and death. And big, and then they would resolve. So the state of the nervous system was very much this ebb and flow, where it was like big, heightened, turned on sympathetic response, fight or flight response, and then come back to neutral relaxation for a long time. And then big and relax. Whereas now we don't have those types of stressors, but we have lots of little stressors. And I don't mean little to minimize your experience. I mean that they're not, for the most part, lions chasing you in the woods. So there's lots of smaller stressors, but they're chronic, they're constant. We're not getting that huge surge and the relax. We're getting just on all the time. So most people are living in this chronic state of stress. Now, our nervous system is still programmed to think that any activation in the system is like a survival threat. And our brains are brilliant at prioritizing our survival as a species. So the idea being that basically survival at all cost. So when you think about everything in your body being connected, thinking about the different systems, your hormonal systems, which are your reproductive systems, but also so much more. We have so many more hormones than what we commonly think of, like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. Your digestive system, your immune system, your mood, all these different things. Like those don't really matter if death is imminent, right? So your brain starts to prioritize. So it says, okay, all the resources need to go to surviving. All the energy needs to flow there. And we're going to shut down or decrease function in other areas of the body to compensate. Because really, if you're being chased by a lion, how safe would it be to have a baby? Right? Like we can think of it that simply. And I always say, like, in terms of hormone health, and particularly around women's hormone health, we're thinking a lot about estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone to some extent. And we use that example of like, you're not going to have a baby if you're being chased by a lion. And you may be like, well, I'm not trying to conceive at this point, but your menstrual cycle is an indicator of fertility. So what happens across a month in terms of a menstrual cycle allows the opportunity to conceive, or it doesn't, and whether you're trying to or not. So this applies to everybody with a menstrual cycle, regardless of if you're trying to have a baby or not. And so what happens is there's kind of two things that happen. One is that when there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of cortisol. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone. Your brain just right away says, like, reproduction's off the table. So that's one. And so it starts to alter things like ovulation occurring. Ovulation produces progesterone. Progesterone would allow for a pregnancy, but progesterone is also the hormone that, when it's in its balanced state, is going to let you have a really nice kind of lead up to your period. So for a lot of people who are experiencing like a lot of stress, they're also experiencing a lot of premenstrual symptoms. They may feel like they're really irritable. They're really, they're getting hot at night. They're not sleeping well. They're anxious. Their mood is really low. They're getting a lot of pain prior to their period starting. So if ovulation isn't happening, progesterone isn't being produced in adequate amounts, it's going to be low. And as a result, you're going to experience more PMS symptoms.
Okay.
So it's connected that way. The other piece of it is that cortisol and your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, are what are known as steroid hormones. It's just a classification, it's chemical, like the chemical makeup of them. And they all have the same chemical backbone, which is cholesterol. So if you're experiencing hormone dysregulation, it's really important to make sure you're getting enough healthy fats in your diet, because we want good cholesterol in there to create that chemical backbone. But there's only so much of it in your body. And again, your brain is really great at prioritizing. So it's saying, oh, lions in the woods, emergency, we need more cortisol. So it diverts that cholesterol that's available to make all of those hormones to making mostly cortisol. And so right away, you're going to see then the decrease in the presence of other hormones there.
You explain it in such a beautiful and easy to see way. Like, I'm listening to you talk and I'm like, well, of course it works like that. Like, it just makes so much sense when you lay it out like that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think, I always say, like, I wish we learned these things in high school. There's a lot that we learned in high school that I'm like, that's not useful.
Yes. And is it changing if people with kids, for instance, that are listening, how do they go about teaching it to their kids if they don't know it fully themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it can be really supportive, particularly for young girls, like when they're starting to get their periods. Like, it could be helpful to have a conversation with them just around like what your period is, because I see a lot of teens in my practice who resent having their period. I mean, a lot of grown women as well, but a lot of people who resent having their period because it's such an annoyance for so many people. And like, I'm not here to say that it's like the best part of the month and a remarkable thing, but it is really an incredible indicator of what the internal landscape of your body is. Some people will call it the sixth vital sign. So when we think about vital signs in our bodies, that's like heart rate, breath rate, temperature, like oxygen saturation, those types of things. And people will say that your period is like your sixth vital sign, in the sense of like it's giving so much information about your body. And so I think that the more that we can educate teens about that, the more supportive that can be for their experience going forward. It can be helpful to like connect with an integrative health practitioner or like a naturopath. And there's common practices within Western medicine, because this is just the limitations of training around hormone health, around that if there's like hormone issues or imbalances, that the go-to solution is to go on the pill.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And because that will help to regulate your hormones, and it will help by putting in synthetic hormones. And so you'll see a change in your symptoms probably, but it's not actually addressing anything at the underlying root cause.
So a lot of the listeners are right around my age, and perimenopause comes up in conversation more often than not. So I'm going to ask this question. If someone is displaying symptoms that are out of the ordinary, can't really be explained, a lot of the conversation goes to, well, it's perimenopause. Is that, how do I say this? Like, is that true? And is that related to stress, or are they two different things? Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's such a great question. And I think it's, I would say that it's probably potentially both. So, I think it's amazing that there's so much more dialogue coming up around menopause generally, perimenopause being the years leading up. For many, it can be up to a decade, leading up to the day of menopause. So menopause itself is one day. It marks the point where it's been 1 year since your last menstrual period. So we have perimenopause, which is like, can be a decade for people. We have menopause, which is 1 day, and then we become postmenopausal. And I think we often think about this time in life being just this downward slide of hormones. So we think about, okay, in like our fertile years, hormones are up here, doing whatever they're doing. And then they're going to slide down and meet that place where they're quite low at that point of menopause. And that's true. That is like, if you were to zoom way out on that curve and you were to look at that curve, that's what it would look like. But if you zoom in and look at what's happening across that time, it's not just this smooth downward slope. What characterizes perimenopause in particular is, to use your word again, dance. It's this dance of inconsistent hormones. So if you zoom in, you're actually seeing like as it moves down that curve. And that can show up in all sorts of ways, right? From a symptomatic perspective. Now, the nervous system and your hormone function are very closely tied, because estrogen is not only, primarily estrogen, but estrogen is not only a hormone that, contributes to your menstrual cycle or fertility. Estrogen, there are many organs and tissues in the body, systems in our body that have receptor sites for estrogen. So estrogen plays a pivotal role in the strength of our bones, our bone health. It plays a pivotal role in our heart health. It supports our mood. It supports our sleep. It supports aspects of our digestion, particularly related to the microbiome in our gut. It supports our tissue like our skin, our hair, our nails, connective tissue. It lubricates every tissue in the body. And the list goes on, right? So estrogen does all of these things. And across the years of perimenopause and that sort of erratic nature of it, in addition to progesterone also being more erratic and the relationship between the two changing a lot, we can start to see a lot of symptoms come up. The other thing that happens in perimenopause related to stress nervous system piece is that this shift in hormones, the shift in the relationship, pushes the nervous system into more of a sympathetic drive. So it naturally is going to push your nervous system to spend more time in that sympathetic state, that fight or flight state. So you're getting sort of the added element, you're perhaps already feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. Then hormones start to fluctuate, and that pushes the nervous system more into a fight or flight state. Then you're getting all of these symptoms that could be coming up from more erratic shifts in hormones. That alone is stressful because you're like, what is this? And I've never felt this way before. There's big changes that can happen in terms of body composition, which for a lot of people can be really upsetting and really frustrating. And just I'm trying everything. And then, the common thing we see is okay, eat less, exercise more, which isn't the solution. And that ends up putting more stress on our system. So it just kind of ends up as this big, mess of different things going on that are just feeding each other. So it's really hard to say, if someone says, I'm really stressed and I'm experiencing these things, yes, it could be perimenopause. Yes, it could be dysregulation in your nervous system, because when you have a dysregulated nervous system, that also affects every system in our body, or can. And for a lot of people who are 35-ish and up, it's going to be a combination of the two.
So one thing that you can do is start focusing on the small things that you are doing and can do, and getting your stress in check. And that is going to inevitably start helping all aspects, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
When we think about integrative medicine, do you see it as, maybe this is a dumb question, but do you see it as more of like a proactive approach or like a reactive answer to what's wrong? Or is it either, like, is it both? Did that make any sort of sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I think it's both. I think that integrative medicine really can shine in a more proactive state. So integrative medicine is looking at all of the different aspects of who you are as a person and how that's contributing to the state of your health, right? So there are different medical models out there. And what we grow up with a Western medical model is very much like, I become an expert in this area. Like, I become an expert in eye health, or I become an expert in heart health or bone health. And this is really important, because we need people who like know everything about your eyes, right? And what it ends up doing, not all the time, but sometimes, is it silos the medical system. So you're running around from person to person if you have something that is more complex than one part of your body. And it also doesn't take into consideration what can be going on within your body that's interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you're having an anaphylactic reaction to something, Western medicine is an incredible tool for acute medicine, like for infection prevention, for delivering babies, for like, there's so many surgeries. Like, this is not to put down Western medicine. It's to say that every field of medicine has its own strengths and its own areas for growth. So integrative medicine can be incredibly helpful for preventative care, because that there's no time for that in our medical system, in sort of your standard Western medical system. And it can also be really, really supportive for more complex conditions, where it does feel like there's a lot of stuff going on and we need to tease apart and figure out, like, okay, what's probably at the root of this. And there are a lot of integrative medicine practitioners, thinking of like naturopathic medicine as an example, who naturopathic physicians can send you for blood work. They can do advanced testing. They can prescribe pharmaceuticals in addition to more natural remedies as well. So there are people who are crossing that bridge to support people more fully that way.
Mm. Yeah, I'm thinking, sorry.
Okay.
It's nice to see more of it coming up and more of it being talked about, instead of feeling lost when you're trying to search out these things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that they're, particularly in the world of perimenopause, there's a lot more discussion now around the benefits, for not everyone, for many, with like something like hormone replacement therapy. What are integrative approaches in terms of like helping to balance blood sugar, doing, thinking about the physiological changes that occur across perimenopause. How does exercise need to change? Like, what we're eating, how does that change? How is our nervous system affected? There's more conversation around this, and I think it's so important, because if you think about, if you live to be like 85 years old, 10 years is a long time,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to ensure that there are tools and supports there for all of us to really thrive during that point.
Mm-hmm. And I do have some friends right now going through some stuff, and they don't know where to turn. And it's very frustrating because it almost gets to a point where you feel very lonely because you feel like you're the only one going through it, even though you're not. And you have to advocate so hard for yourself when you don't even know what is going on with you. And then all you know is that you don't feel like you used to, and that can tick you off. And if no one's finding out, I mean, if you're doing stuff and can't find out what's wrong, then at some point inevitably I think people take that on as like something must be wrong with me, which is not the case.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's
Mm.
not the case. And, like, to be fair, I always think it's really important. This is why it's important to work with someone, because symptoms can be many things. So
Mm.
this is, the disclaimer here of like, it can't we can't always just assume that something is, I don't mean just to minimize it, like it's only stress or it's only perimenopause. Like, there are symptoms that overlap that can be very serious. And so if you're feeling like there's something going on, it is important to work with someone
Yeah.
to, you know, and that's where you say like it can feel very lonely and isolating. So it's important to seek out care. It's important to talk through like the sort of, is this quote unquote a normal experience within, the parameters of my life, or do we need to investigate this further? So I always think it's important to just say that.
Mhm.
um, and it can be very helpful to work with someone to help to connect those dots, because if we don't have that foundational understanding, it can feel like there's this going on and this going on and this going on and this going on. And so it's like, how do I even address these 7 things that I'm experiencing, when actually we could address like one larger root cause
Mm.
that's creating all of those 7 symptoms.
And what I find interesting sometimes too is that people don't even realize they have some symptoms, or they don't even realize because their baseline for what is their normal quotation marks is so out of whack that that is their normal and they don't know any different,
Mhm.
which is crazy to me. But you kind of don't know unless you don't know if you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know. And um, that's what's really neat when I get to work with people one on one is when we start to say, okay, like let's focus on this adjustment, like this shift. And then they come back like 2 weeks or a month later and they're like, oh, like when I did that, I actually noticed that like I wasn't waking up at 2 in the morning, or if I did, I was able to fall back asleep. And I wasn't waking up feeling anxious in the morning anymore. Oh, and I wasn't getting that 3 p.m. crash.
Mm,
Right. And it's like from one thing, because it's all connected.
yeah. I'm doing right now your 14-day reset,
Mhm.
and I love it because for those of you that are not familiar with it, Rachel has it's this 14 days, and there's information that's emailed every day, but you have this workbook of things to do every day. It's not tedious, it doesn't take a lot of time, but it takes, like you say, intention and just awareness, right? And it's so fascinating to me because I was in a place where I wasn't doing my things consistently, and I'm well aware that I'm not feeling as good as I could, and I know what to do to change it. And yet it still feels not impossible, but very, very difficult to just get my butt to doing them. And so even if you know, sometimes it's still hard. And that's where that accountability piece comes in, and just the knowledge in your, like the wisdom in your workbook is one thing. And then I remember the very first morning, I was like, the night before, I was like, tomorrow's day one. And then my alarm went off and I was like, maybe tomorrow. And then I heard your voice in my head before I even opened my eyes, and I saw the workbook pages and I was like, who do you want to be in this moment? And then it just was that, the trigger in a good way to actually do the things. And it was the best day I've had in a very long time. So thank
Mm.
you for that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, I love what you said, like, who do you want to be today, right? Like, and we all have that choice. And I think that we often have these shoulds
Yeah.
sitting in our minds saying, like, well, if you want to be successful today, you should be doing all of these things.
Yeah.
And if that's coming up, like, I really encourage you to just check that. Check what are those shoulds, and like, why are they there? What is a way to maybe pare that back a little bit? Because the morning reset, as you're describing, I wanted to make this so accessible for people.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step is a 90-second practice that you do in bed before you get up. And I guarantee you, every single person listening to this has 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And if you cut part of it in half and it was 60 seconds that you were still committing to yourself, I know you can find that. Like, just pause for a second and think about, like, where are all the other places that you're spending 90 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's so obvious.
And it goes back to what you said at the beginning, where it's like, what do you want? And actually, how bad do you want it? And then
Mm-hmm.
what are you willing to do to
Mm-hmm.
get there? This is a question that's probably a whole episode in itself, but um how can busy women go from feeling like they're trying to survive to actually thriving?
Well, I think the first step is knowledge. I really believe that when we understand the why behind things, it creates an easier path to making change.
Mm,
Because if you don't understand, so as an example, we hear all the time, like, put your phone away before you go to bed, have an hour without screens before you go to bed. But it's like, why? Like, people will say, well, you'll sleep better. But why will you sleep better? Right? So if I tell you that chemically what's happening in your brain when you're on your phone is that the blue light in your phone is stimulating cortisol production, which is meant to keep you awake and running from lions, and that cortisol inhibits melatonin, which has to be present for you to be sleepy and fall asleep, then it might start to make a little bit more sense that we're not just saying, like, put your phone away because, oh, it's good for you. It's like, here's what is actually happening on a molecular level in your brain that's going to make it harder for you to fall asleep.
mm, mhm.
And so when you hear that, it's like, oh, okay, I could try and do that. So I think that one is knowledge. We have to understand on, not on like an in-depth sciencey level, but like on a basic physiological level, what's happening, because it just connects us to our own bodies. So I think that's number one. Number two is finding manageable ways, and this is going to look a little bit different for everybody because everyone's life is set up differently. Find manageable ways to take pause in your day.
Mm.
So the idea of like, stop, slow down, take a nap. It's like, no, okay, sure, if you can, that's nice. But like, I know that's not possible for me. So it's like, okay, well, I walk to work. When I walk to the clinic, it's like, I'm not on my phone. And to be fair, like, and this is fitting it in, I live 3.5 minutes walking to my clinic. So this is a very short amount of time. So this is saying like you can fit this in. This could be even if you're on like an hour commute, right?
Mm.
I'm not on my phone. I'm not listening to anything. I'm just walking.
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, that is like a transitional pause. I'm still moving. I'm not stationary, but it's a way to like have quiet time before I move into the next thing.
Yeah.
So it's like, could that be on your commute? Could that be that when you get out, like when you arrive at home at the end of the day, you sit in the car for 2 minutes and take a few deep breaths before you walk into the house where so much is there and waiting for you. It's like, how can we find those moments of pause? And I know it sounds very minimal, but it really does make a difference because it allows you to be present. So it allows your nervous system to settle into a feeling of safety.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one. And then another is like really putting the tools in place, like taking a lot of what we've already talked about today around like, what change do you want to make? What would be, what are the possibilities for that? And then seeing like what actually is like, maybe taking 2 hours to do meal prep on a Sunday feels like it's pulling you away from the family for 2 hours on a Sunday, but maybe that's going to allow you to be way more present with them through the entire week.
Mm-hmm.
So like trying to zoom out a little bit to look at that structure. And it can be very hard, I think, to do some of that work on your own. It can be really helpful to work with a coach or a practitioner who can model that back to you and give you some ideas, because we get really stuck, or we get like the blinders on of like, this is the way I've always done it. So it can be really helpful to have people who are gently holding you accountable to that.
So on that note, how can people reach you if they feel connected to you and want to learn more?
Yeah, so I do one-on-one support for people in person and virtually. And you can take a look at that through my clinic, which is glowintegrative.com, or follow us on Instagram, Glow Integrative. And then you can follow me personally. I have lots on my website, rachelmark.ca. I have a free quiz, which is rachelmark.ca/quiz, which is how much is stress affecting your hormones. So it's like 2 minutes to do, and it can give you some really good insights to determine how that relationship is occurring for you. At Glow, we also have a virtual series that's starting May 7th, which is called the Glow Method, and it's a 3-week path to thriving in a busy life. So it's exactly what we're talking about here. I'm teaming up with two of my colleagues. So Amber Baker, who is a holistic nutritionist and my business partner at Glow, and then also Dr. Ayla Lester, who's a naturopathic physician at Glow. And we're walking through essentially those 3 steps that I just laid out for you in a virtual group setting. So there'll be a workbook and supplementary materials, and then 3 live calls, 1 a week across those 3 weeks. Yeah, you can learn more about that at glowintegrative.com.
And also the links will be in the show notes too for people. And not too terribly long ago, you did a series of posting about how, and I am not going to get this right. I can't remember the wording that you used, but basically, you don't need another like blah, blah, blah that social media is trying to sell you. And it's all about like just stripping it back to basics. And I love your approach to life. And I love the shares that you give are super simple, not always easy, but like simple to implement and easy to sustain and just are very real and applicable. So you're doing really good in the world. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like you and I are so aligned on that, and that it really is, there are things that you can buy or do, the quick fixes, if you will, that may help a little bit or may help for the short term. But ultimately, it comes down to the foundation of your life that you're creating, and that is small habits day after day. It's not glamorous, and I think that's why it's hard to do the work that we do,
Mhm.
because it's so much easier to buy this trinket or get this supplement or do this. And it's not to say that those aren't potentially part of the bigger picture, but they're not the only thing. I always think back to like the Kellogg's commercials, and they say like part of a complete breakfast, which now, knowing about nutrition, I roll my eyes at. But like, it's like these are part of a complete
Mhm.
way to live your life. It's not even, I don't even like to say program or protocol, whatever. Like, this is your life.
Yeah.
It's the day after day. And it's not glamorous and it's hard sometimes. And it's really the only sustainable way.
And it's being very real with yourself about, do you want to just exist every day, or do you actually want to take charge of your life?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're so busy and you're doing all these things, don't you want to enjoy it?
Yeah. Yeah. Rachel, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to mention?
I don't think so. Just a reminder. I think it can be hard sometimes to listen to these types of conversations and think like, oh, that would be so nice, or that's so easy, but my life is set up this way. And first, I think it's important to remind everyone that you're doing a good job.
Mm.
As you are, you're juggling a million balls in the air, and that in and of itself is worth celebrating. We
Yeah.
need to celebrate that.
Mhm.
And also, there is a way, there's always a way.
Mm, thank you. I forgot to
Thank
ask you
you
a
so
question at
much.
the beginning, which is what brings you joy? So I'm going to ask you a different question at the end. And what is something that you're grateful for in this moment?
Hmm. In this very moment right now, I'm really grateful for this conversation and to spend time with you. More broadly, I think I'm really grateful for the spring and to see,
Mm,
the blooms starting to come, and just that reawakening after winter. It feels yeah, really hopeful, really exciting.
yeah. Thank you so much for today. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
your wisdom. And I look forward to having you on again. This is like not a two-time thing. So,
I'd love to. Thank you.
um, thank you for all that you do in the world. Listeners, thank you for sharing your time. And be sure to go check out more Rachel. And with that, we will say have a great week and ciao for now.